Actually, don't be shy is also something which would define the 3 companies I present in my top 3. So in this top 3 section, I'm going to try to present to you every month something that caught my attention on a specific topic and to present 3 different ways to look at it. So what I'm looking at this month is desalination, because as you know, the word is somehow drying out, which you just said with the fact that we're in the hottest place and the driest place possible. Don't worry, this afternoon you will have some rain.
You have chosen that.
But if you look overall on the entire world, we have climate change, which is here to stay, we all know that, and we will be missing 40% of the water needed in 2030. One of the ways to look for a solution is obviously desalination. And we say obviously, but it's not that obvious because desalination has some drawbacks. It produces brines, it uses a lot of energy, it takes some space on land, it poses many questions on top of the solutions it brings. So if we look at the projections that the OECD is doing, that the UN is doing, there is this element that desalination should be doubling, tripling between now and 2030. And if you had now green hydrogen into the picture, then it's maybe multiplying by 4 or by 5. So we need more capacity, but we have a problem with the existing. So the 3 solutions I'm presenting today, it's not only companies, it's more solutions. They have interesting takes. And honestly, I have no clue if those ones will be the future. What I can say, and you will give me your opinion, is that it sounds appealing. So the first one is a company called Waterrise. And if I'm not wrong, they're from Norway. And what they do is that they leverage what they learned from oil and gas, and they take a skid, like a reverse osmosis skid, and they look at it and they think, where do we need some energy? And you need energy on the feed side to have a lot of pressure. Normally you take a pump, you add some pressure, like 60 bars, and then you produce through the reverse osmosis. And what they say is that basically 60 bars, if you go 600 meters under the sea, you have 60 bars. Sure. So why don't we use that? So they take the skid, they drop it in the ocean, put it on the bottom of the ocean, and they leverage that pressure, and actually it works. Of course, they need to pump back the water on shore or on the boat, but on the permanent side of the membranes, they have that additional pressure, which makes it more efficient. They claim it to be up to 50% more efficient than traditional desalination. They have modules which can produce 50,000 cubic meters a day. So it sounds to me like something really promising. Did you hear of the technology yet?
No, I haven't heard about that. But my question would be, what I learned is very close to here in Freiburg. I was spending my some time during my university. And there I learned if you go underground, it costs you 3, 4, 5, 6, even 10 times more as if you would be above ground. That means if you have a pipe and you go underground, it costs you much, much more. So my question here is, I mean, going 600 meters down, that means it is not very close to the coast. You have to go far away. You have to have deep, you have to go down to the ground. You have to have all the pipes. It costs a lot of money. Is that really worse? That is the first thought I had on that.
It's clearly a drawback. You cannot put it, for instance, if you go to the Arabic Gulf,
where you don't have that much depth. To the Rhine River.
No, you wouldn't desalinate the Rhine. I have a scoop for you, Björn. That is not salty water. That is just...
It's not salty?
No, it's not salty.
Where's it coming from? But joke aside.
But you're right. So you have to have some depth, which is what's interesting for you. For instance, in Norway, it's pretty fast. You're in the ocean, so really you're not in the Mediterranean Sea. You have a lot of depth available. There are some advantages as well to take that water there because you have less life, so less biofilm, less organic pollution, which means also that the water is already purer even if you are still with a lot of salts. So you need to desalinate, but you have less fouling of the membrane. So there's advantages and drawbacks, but clearly there's a difference between underground and undersea. Undersea, you're just dropping. Underground, you need to be digging.
But even there you have to fix it, right? I mean, you cannot just put it in somewhere into the...
Then you need to have a very good pipe supplier, and if you have a very good pipe supplier, then
do you know one?
Very good. I know a very good one, and we have a lot of cool references down on the bottom of the ocean. But that's a different story, and I don't want to make.
Hey, you signed the agreement that you are not allowed to say your company name here.
So I'm going to say it. It's GF Piping System, and look at our references. He pushed me to do it, so now I'm allowed to do it. So that was my number 3. Let's move to number 2. I forgot the name of the company, so let me cheat. But basically the technology is using waves. Their process is called Wave to O. It's just one of the companies I've found in that field. But basically what they're doing is that they're saying, okay, what is a pump? I mean, if you already tried to pump up your tire on your bike, for instance, you have that pump and you're doing that. And if you're doing that, exactly the same, that's a wave going up and down and up and down. So if you fix something on the bottom of the ocean and on the top of the ocean you have something moving with the waves, then you're activating the pump and you can be pumping the water to the reverse osmosis onshore. And there they claim to have smaller capacity. I don't want to say something fully wrong, but it's 6,000 or 12,000 cubic meters per day. And basically where they compete with that technology is not against the big plants producing a lot of water. It's really for decentralized desalination. So you're on an island or you're in a small property and you need to have water maybe part-time in the year, maybe really for a specific industrial application, then you would go for that solution. And they compare to a diesel-powered desalination. And what they say is that if you take their solution and you replace the diesel-powered one, it's like removing 1,050 cars from the road in terms of carbon emissions. So that's their promise. So they do this combination of onshore and offshore. You have other companies which do everything on the same stuff. So with the wave, they also produce the water and then you have to collect the water on sea and to bring it back onshore. And that's something which is sponsored by the state of California. So you have different approaches, but basically leveraging the waves.
I have seen something similar. I think somewhere in the UK, and I talked to this guy, I think a year ago or 2 years ago, and this was not really for the decentralized approach. This was really for kind of centralized approach. So they had huge volumes. There was huge volumes, but the issue is even there, it is so cost intensive going out there, having this kind of wave system that you get the energy out of there. I mean, in the end, you have to do the Mars, right? But let's say, even he was struggling with that idea, honestly saying. So, in principle, it sounds, in the first place, for me, cool. We're using the nature, Mother Nature, right? So we're using the Mother Nature to produce energy, right? So to help us to desal the water, but doesn't bring us this back a little bit to the question, isn't that all a kind of energy question? If it is a kind of energy question, maybe there are other ways to produce this kind of energy, right, as you try to explain, but there are other, let's say, preferences, call it this way, we have at the moment.
To your cost question, I think it's a matter of scale. I mean, if you look at desalination, the way it was done in the 80s with thermal desalination, then with the early reverse osmosis desalination, that was pretty expensive and used a lot of energy. And it went better and better and better. And nowadays we reach efficiencies that everybody would have called you sick and crazy if you had told that 20 years ago. But at some point, innovation plateaus and there's the limit of thermodynamics. So it's a matter of how much can they scale up their technology.
Okay, but in the end is also, you need to have to find the place, right, where you have the waves. I mean, the question is, how high must be the wave to get as much as possible energy out of that? So again, if you go somewhere close to the coast, the waves are pretty small, right? So that means you have to go far away where you have maybe waves up to 10 meters that you get a little bit the power.
I'm pretty sure you don't need 10 meters, but if someone from the Wave to a Process or someone from the Californian one or the British company you mentioned, Björn, is watching this, please come to me. I'd be interested to go in depth with the technology because that sounds really appealing and I'd like to have a good answer to all the questions Björn is raising. And that leads me to my number one in that top three. And actually that number one is microbial desalination cells. So what it is a mix between microbial fuel cells and a membrane desalination. The way it works is that in a classical microbial fuel cell, you would have an anode and a cathode. And basically you have your wastewater which is flowing across the anode and your bacteria live on the anode and they eat some of that organic matter. And when they eat that, they breathe electricity. So electrons are going over the membrane and protons are going over the wire. So you're creating a current between the anode and the cathode. And you could be collecting that energy. Why is it interesting? Because theoretically speaking, inside wastewater, you have 7 times the energy needed to treat wastewater. So if you have a perfect system, you could be using one of the times to treat it, and the 6 other times is just free energy, just because when we poop, it creates energy. So that's the kind of stuff we could be leveraging. So What they do with microbial desalination cells is that in between those anode and cathode streams, they put an additional layer where you have salty water which is flowing through. And when the salty water is flowing through, there's a difference of charge between the anode and the cathode, which is breaking down the salt. The salt, it's NaCl, and Na plus is going on one side and Cl minus is going on the other side, which means you are taking out the salt out of water and you're creating drinking water. The limitation to that is that today the technology is able to produce drinking water out of brackish water, not out of salty water, so not of seawater. You could use it as a pre-treatment for salty water, so seawater, to turn it into brackish water, which then leads less reverse osmosis to be treated as drinking water.
Why is it not going directly to the seawater? Why doesn't it work? What is the limitation?
Because of the concentration. Actually,
is the concentration too high that it works?
Right now, if you look at the microbial fuel cell companies out there, so the pure players, most of the time they say they can be energy neutral and slightly positive. So actually, this slightly positive is the full question, because the more positive you are, the bigger the difference in charge. And if the difference in charge gets bigger, then you can attract more Na plus and Cl minus, and then you can desalinate more water.
True. I mean, I have seen these kind of technologies, and I'm a totally layman in that, totally, honestly, because I couldn't find the angle to understand that. I'm an environmental engineer, and I had the feeling that I need to study electrical engineering to get the entire system. So, and my question here is, I mean, this is not really new, right? This is not 100% new, because these kind of anode cathode thing, I mean, we know since many years, and even that we can treat wastewater with that, even that is known since decades, right?
Yes.
But we haven't really reached the point where this is a kind of breakthrough technology.
Okay.
And the question isn't that a little bit too complicated? I mean, you have to explain that to a municipality here, right? You have to have the people who can operate this. Because right now is a physical plant, a chemical physical plant, right? We know what to do, we know this since decades. If this comes in, does these people who operate this wastewater treatment plant, does they have to learn something totally new?
There's a lot of stuff in what you said. First, let me remind you the timelines of innovation in the water industry. Yes, it's around for a while, but innovation needs to be around for a decade in academia to start have an application.
But even if they stay for 10 or 20 years, I know the study you are mentioning at the moment, that doesn't mean that they are successful.
No, so what I'm saying is that you need to have an alignment of planets. If the iPhone comes out, it's not because Steve Jobs is a genius, it's that at a certain point in time, some kind of innovation meets some other kind of innovation, means the downsizing of the chips meets, and when you have that sweet spot, then you're creating innovation. And when you're discussing with those companies which are out there, what they say is that nowadays, the technologies in the anode, the technologies in the cathode, in the membrane in between, have made a leapfrog, which means that nowadays we could reach that beginning of the era. But that's, you need a crystal ball. To your question about the operation, it's pretty funny you mentioned the plant behind us, because the plant behind us is an MBBR. So it is anoxic. So basically, in terms of operation, it's not that different.
It's a biological plant, right?
Yes.
So that means
a microbial fuel cell is biological as well.
And but there you need a cathode, you need an anode, you need to understand the entire process. Here you have wastewater, it's a biological, and then you put some chips into that.
That's
and then
where I disagree with you, because actually you don't need to understand it, because
but you have to operate.
You can monitor the current, and actually with the current between the anode and the cathode, you have a very, very clear and detailed view of the state of the thing. You can do preventive maintenance. Those bacteria can send you calendar invite. I know a company doing that. I'll put the link in the comments, where they put you a calendar invite if the bacteria is upset. How cool is that? I mean, you don't need to be present on site.
How many emails I get from all the bacteria which are in, or get I just one email if they all say, well, we are saturated?
If they notice that there's a shift in quality or that something is going wrong in what they do, you will see a shift in the current, which means basically you receive an email. That's just crazy. So in terms of operation,
but I don't want to have an email. I want to have a machine behind that, which is operating then in the next step.
That's very interesting.
So I don't want to have an email. Do you want to have an email, guys? No, we don't want to have an email.
Maybe we should be doing one day a show on digitalization and how we can go to the full automation. That is a spoiler.
That's true. But for me, still in our I mean, I have seen many technologies over the last years, and my feeling is that they are all pretty complex to understand. I mean, you need someone who's putting the money on the table and saying, well, that's a technology I want to have. But he needs to understand the technology, and then he needs to have people who can implement the technology. Then you need people who can operate the technology, and that's more and more a challenge because there's so many things coming out there, and I don't get it anymore.
I don't disagree with that, but you mentioned that I would be referring to Paulo Callahan's study about the timelines of the dynamics of water innovation. What's interesting in his study is that he shows that actually it's not like innovation grows, and it's pretty cool, and then it's in the middle of the market. It's not the way it works. You have innovators, which are the first 1%, which take it, and those guys have a sound understanding.
But even
then you have the early adopters, then you have the early majority.
Okay, but even there's a big gap where you can fall in, and then you die with your technology and with your company.
Yes, I'm just saying those 3 technologies sounded to me like interesting.
Okay. Let me ask one final question. How many references are out there right now with that?
So with the microbial desalination cell, there's a couple of ones, small scale, and Aqualia is currently scaling up some of these approaches. And when you discuss with the microbial fuel cell companies, what they say is that where they see the future is that their own references might be the reference of the future for desalination, because they could be building the Lego bricks, and then desalination companies would be doing the rest.
Okay,
for the wave ones, there's much more references already out there.
Okay, but again, I mean, we are talking about desalination, but desalination for me is all about energy. It's all about energy. So the question is, do we have an energy problem?
We have an energy problem, absolutely.
So exactly. So if we solve the energy problem, then we could take the classical reverse osmosis.
But why would you do that? I mean, you could be just having something more efficient on all the levels.
Let's say maybe the municipality is able to, with the solar panels on the roof, to get all the electricity, because they are more efficient as right now. And then we can operate the reverse osmosis system with that.
Even the most efficient solar panel has an availability of 60-70%,
like this.
and it doesn't
have
that
I'm not saying about now, I'm saying about future.
In the future,
if you solve the energy problem.
Availability is still going to be something.
The question really isn't, should we work always on the technology to make the technology more efficient, coming with something new nobody understands anymore? Or shouldn't we go to the big elephant in the room?
When Björn doesn't understand something, then nobody understands it.
No, that's not what I'm saying. But I'm saying, well, shouldn't we go to the big problem, to the big elephant in the room and say, well, it's an energy problem, so we need energy. That's all what we need.
The microbial desalination cell, what they say is that they can desalinate 1 cubic meter of water for 0.5 kilowatt hour of energy. 0.5.
Okay.
How many do you need with the best in class desalination out there in the traditional reverse osmosis?
I don't have the number in my head, but I know it's more. I
would say there's a 3 factor, but
I was thinking 3.5 to 4.
No, I wouldn't say 3.5. I think it's about 0.5 to 1.5 to 2 for the best case. So it would be 3 times more or 4 times more.
But average is somehow, I think,
probably.
Yeah, but
anyway, that's the promise.
Yeah, sure.
So you're right.
But even then, even if you need just 0.5 in energy, where does the energy come from? So, and if we solve the energy, if we have tremendously amount of energy and nobody cares anymore, then we could go back to the standard one.
You will never have tremendous amounts of energy and nobody cares from it. No, that's just unrealistic. That's totally out of this world. What I'm saying is that in the wastewater there's 7 times the energy needed to treat it, and by other studies it's 10 times the energy needed to treat it. And what do? We spend additional 100% to destroy that energy. We spend energy to destroy the energy. That's what I found appealing in that technology in particular. It is that it is addressing
but anyway, I heard that you agree it's an energy problem.
It is an energy problem.
It's an energy problem. So if we create more energy, then we can solve this issue.
I think, Björn, you're just beating an open door. The water energy nexus is known, and it's the same topic all the time. If you have unlimited amount of energy, then you can even distillate your water if you want. I mean, everything's possible.
Fully agree with that. But let's say we are the water industry, but let's say from the global perspective, I mean, we are not the only one who need more energy, right? Or at least we are going down with our technology that they consume less. The entire world, everything, all science are working on this big problem. Where to get the energy if the oil is gone? Solar, wind, whatever, right? So if we could find a way to solve that, wouldn't we think about microbial fuel cells if we could use a classic arrow treatment system, if we would have
Okay,
enough
that is
energy.
another debate. I think you're wrong with the magnitude and of the scale of what you're discussing. But I think if we go too deep in that sidetrack, we did another show. So maybe take a mental note, and for you watching that, if you really want us to fight over that, because you see we disagree on that, then tell us in the comments.
No, I'm not saying that I disagree. All I'm saying is it is an energy problem.
The guy feels it's wrong.
No, I'm not feels it's wrong. But it is an energy problem, and we are going down with our technologies to reduce more and more. But the question is really, is that the right leverage to get this done?
That was my top 3 for this month. I forgot a lot of technologies which would be even more interesting maybe in desalination. So if you have more, if you want to enrich the discussion, please feel free to use the comment section for that.